Good evening. Good evening. Hello, Humanities 101 students. Tonight, we will be talking about the final project, the remaining month of the semester, and your final project, which is all about micro-accommodations. So, I want to talk about your assignment, kind of what you're going to be looking at, the techniques you're going to be using, because I'm not going to be defining for you what problem you're going to be solving, and I'm not going to be identifying for you a problem, and I will not be identifying for you a community or a group of people that you're going to be looking at. But I will be defining the tools and the techniques. Okay, and this is kind of where I think that the creativity in this project can kind of come out here. So we're going to be talking tonight about micro-accommodations, your accessibility project, and just as the title of this broadcast is Neurodiversity, Autism, and Micro-Accommodation. So I will disappear from the screen here so that we can focus on the information at hand. And again, if you're following along on any of the other social media platforms, feel free to check us out on YouTube. We're streaming on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, X tonight. So we're a little bit of everywhere. So we're talking about micro accommodations and accessibility. So, and the reason why is today, April 2nd, is World Autism Awareness Day. This is a initiative since 2007 officially with the UN declaration, but it's been going on really as far as the neurodiversity and neurodivergent movement has been going on for probably about a half a century. Really, when you're looking at the 70s and the disability rights movement that was going on there. So World Autism Awareness Day is today. You may, if you were on social media, you may have seen lots and lots of posts about autism, about being autistic. There was an Autistic Joy campaign today where people were posting pictures of things that make them happy. I even did a post on my LinkedIn. So we're going to be talking about that, and we'll also be talking a little bit about this graphic on the right here. Language, and the way in which people talk about language, and the way they talk about inclusion. All right, which I know sometimes can be a bad word in our society today, but it isn't when it comes to humanities class, because I don't see exclusion as a negative term either. It's a human truth. We both include and we exclude, and often they come from the same place. They come from that same need of belonging, and so that need of belonging sometimes causes us to point out those who don't. Okay, so this is the impetus behind today's date, and why we're focusing on this issue. But again, I'm going to utilize this topic to talk about micro accommodations and how one would micro accommodate for autism, so that I can model for you what you will be doing for your final project, which, as Mr. AJ has said in the chat, is due May 1st at noon. So when I am looking at micro accommodation, again, what is at the center of this class is community. All right, and I do some work with the Ohio Center for Autism and Low Incidence, OCALI. And they have a campaign that's A plus B equals C. And that is simply that when we have access and belonging, that is when you'll have community. And access and belonging seems so simple. Access and belonging is really the difficult part of this equation. Everyone thinks it's so hard to build community. It isn't. It's hard to build access, and it's hard to build belonging. So this is why, you know, the people at Ocali have kind of focused on this as a good mnemonic to remember. All right. So, and the topic at hand is autism, and autism falls under the umbrella of neurodiversity. And you may have heard of neurodivergence, and the idea of the different ways in which people think. Neurodiversity, the celebration of that, because the idea of neurotypicality, the normal quote unquote way people think, and neurodivergence, the abnormal or unnormal, I think is a better word. I don't like the word normal at all. But you know, if we're going to talk technically, neurodivergence is the other to what is perceived as normal. And this is the thing, normality. This is why, as a humanities professor, I have a hard time not defining what is normal in a given culture, but arguing that that is the reality of normal, because normal will change depending on where you are, depending on who you're with. You do not speak the same way with your friends on Saturday night that you do with your grandmother when you're having family dinner. You choose your words, you choose your phrasing. All of these things are ways in which you adapt to the social situation. You feel out what's normal, quote unquote, in the situation, and play to that. We'll talk about what that is a little later as well. But when we talk about neurodiversity, we are really talking about understanding that there is no one way that people think. Okay. So again, people are saying that they're confused. I'm talking about this topic because, again, we are this is a model for what we're going to be doing for our final project. You're going to be creating a micro-accommodation. You're going to be thinking about a way to help others, and I'll get there. Okay. And yes, Madison comes in for the win. If you read the book that is assigned, you will find that a lot of this probably will be review. And there's the rub. And so again, when we talk about what is neurodiversity, basically this slide, the main reason why I have this slide up is because I want you to look at that number here on the right. 15 to 20%. 15 to 20% of the world's population is neurodiverse. And that means that we're looking at 1.2 to 1.6 billion people. And so this isn't small numbers, even though when you're thinking about a majority versus a minority, 1 out of every 5 may seem small unless you're a family of 5. And that one family member, right? That's the world to you. So when we're talking about neurodiversity, and hold on, I gotta flip something here. All right, because I'm watching the chat and I'm not focusing on what I'm saying, so it may even get more confusing if I do that. All right. Okay, so let's get to this next slide because I want to talk about what is micro-accommodation. Okay, so when we're discussing our final project, what we're going to be looking at is the concept of micro-accommodation. And when we talk about access to a community, okay, and you'll see this in the course text, we talk about the ivory tower. Okay, in the very first chapter that you were to read, the ivory tower idea is very prevalent in academia. And so, this idea of everything being held off and cloistered and separate from what you can access um, is very much a part of the narrative of going to college. It's cost restrictive. You have to buy your books. The professors don't care about your personal life. They don't care if you're late. All of these things that are designed and almost seem as obstacles, right? And in the book, in academic ableism, there's a mention of the retrofit and how if we're trying to build a staircase to the top of that tower that will fit everyone, um, it may look a little clunky. It may, even in the book, there are images of ramps that have been retrofitted in cities in Europe and in the United States that are ridiculously compliant to the point where they look like a Disney ride line. Okay, it looks like you're waiting in a line for a Disney ride. So we're not talking about these big things. We're talking about small little things. And when I talk about micro accommodation, I like to think of it, if you got to put a dollar number on it, we're talking about something under $200. If you were to implement and put into play something that could change the lives of 200 people for just a dollar a person. All right. And so that's what you kind of think about with micro accommodation. Okay. And this is a smart and easy way of creating belonging. And you may want to be creating belonging for a various number of reasons, right? You may be a business owner and you want your employees to like where they work. You might be a business owner and you want people to come buy your stuff. You may be a parent and you want your kids and your family to be healthy and respectful of one another. There are many ways in which you can accommodate the people in your life, and in small ways that you can implement changes that will have huge impacts. And he'll give you some examples here. And this slide just simply gives you the background of where it comes from. And so again, the most important thing to take from here is this idea here at the bottom, the second paragraph, the idea that if you want to go further into the theory behind this, it's a field called user experience or UX. And if you are a graphic design student, if you're a computing student, if you're a business student, if you're a communications student, you want to Google this term because you will hear about it again. Okay, this is the new and up and coming thing. So user experience. It's not so much always about user interface and what feels good to the engineer. It is what is good to the user and what is good for the experience. Think IBM in the 90s versus Apple. Think of something that is functional versus something that is both beautiful and functional, and also universal design for learning, which is called UDL. So if you Google UX or UDL, you will find some of the ideas that influence this concept of micro accommodation. And so basically, when we think about when I kind of place into context how individuals, if they see, let's see, someone who is too big trying to get into a chair, someone who is too small trying to get up a staircase, someone who is in a wheelchair trying to get up a staircase, someone who has communication issues and is trying to get a sandwich. Okay, in those situations, often we forget that the first thing one needs is patience. But beyond that, you need to think that people acting, someone who is, holding their hands to their throat, right? In that universal sign for choking, We know what that means. When someone smiles at us, we know what that means. Behavior communicates ideas to us. So when we're in situations and when we see people who are struggling and facing obstacles, we want to focus on one, being patient, two, focusing on their behavior and thinking about the messages that it sends. And we can do all of that if we focus on just being present. Often people are thinking about something that either um, happened yesterday, happened tomorrow. And here's another kind of way of seeing PB and J. But we utilize that idea of PB and J because it really is. It seems like trying to change the world and make it a better place is a very daunting task, which is why no one ever tries it. And I'm saying that facetiously. Everyone tries to do it, but everyone's trying to do these grand gestures. And I'm a little bit J.R.R. Tolkien in that, like Gandalf, I believe that it is small acts. It are, it's these little everyday kind acts of acknowledgement of another person, acknowledging their presence in your presence, and then maybe acknowledging that they're struggling, and then acknowledging that you care about that struggle and want to do something to fix that. All right, or to at least maybe not fix it, but to help them along with it, to give them a little hand. So again, just another kind of explanation here of PBJ if you want to go back. So what are some examples? So when I talked about, and I didn't get a chance to talk about it because I wanted to get to micro-accommodation a little bit more quickly. But when I earlier in the presentation, boom. Oh wait, hold on. I need to go back. Earlier in the presentation, boom. And because it's April 2nd, I'm going to go back. I wanted to talk a little bit about autism so that you can understand these micro-accommodations. Autism is often seen as a neurological or a developmental disorder, and it is technically those things. But when I'm helping people kind of wrap their mind around what the concept is, it's a communication. It's a social and communication. Um, uh, sorry, not deficit, but a and here I am having communication issues. But it's problems with communicating with oneself and with others. So you have issues of sensory issues of the world around you, the space in which you're in, the time in which you're in, and the social communication. So when we think about the world in a given day, there are lights, sounds, your clothes touching you, people interacting with you, them touching you, the smells of other people, all of these other things that we all experience. But because, as Dr. Nick Walker defines, and I'll back up one more slide, it's a kind of hypersensitive amygdala. It is synapses that fire at possibly, at least this is one theory, synapses that fire at different and accelerated rates. And so the brain, whereas you may perceive a loud noise, imagine if you had an amplification device in your ear that made the loud noise even louder. Imagine if some of you have been to an eye doctor and had your eyes dilated and they give you those little glasses because everything is so bright. I often explain, to colleagues and friends that is what sensory issues, and not having control over that always, right? Because, I may, there may be a time where someone with autism, a change in routine could cause the radio to be perceived as louder. And so, whereas the rest of the world sees it as a lack of self-control, it really is communication. I'm speaking from a first-person perspective because I have autism, and so this is one of the things that a lot of people don't know about. That oh my God, my professor, he can teach a class and he has autism. And yes, I could drive a car, I can have a family, I can do all kinds of things. And there are, again, lots of different types of the way in which autism manifests. But these basic communication, sensory issues, those are the things that are prevalent. And so when we're talking about micro accommodations and how is the world one? How is the world an unwelcoming place for people with those issues? And two, what might we do in small ways to make the world better for them? And so if you notice in this slide, I've got some examples. Very, 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 very cheap. If you think about all of the, Dearborn Homecoming, right? In our town, we have this, the big festival and celebration when they don't cancel it. 4th of July is another one. But if you think about fireworks and the loud noises, if you think about flashing lights, if you think about all of those things, there are subtle ways, cheap ways that you can accommodate for that. And again, earplugs. I went to a hotel in Cleveland. It was right next to a train track. And in that hotel, on the check-in desk, they had a little note that said, "We are next to a train track. It is loud. Here are earplugs. Take these earplugs. Please utilize." It wasn't the idea that they knew that it was loud. They recognized that it bothered people. And rather than requiring people to ask, "Hey, is there any way that we can deal with this train?" they simply put it out in front and said, "Here, we know this is loud. We know this is annoying. We're with you." And if you think about the idea of belonging, when someone catches your eye, and even in a if you're waiting in line at the store and it's just taking forever, and you catch eyes with a complete stranger and they give you that look like, "Yeah, man, this is taking forever." There's a slight sense of, for a moment, you connect and you belong. Misery loves company, I know, but it's more than that, right? It's a recognition. It's what I said, the patience and behaviors, communication, being present. It's a recognition of existence. Things like sensory break rooms. There used to be one of these in the liberal arts. I don't know if it's still there in the liberal arts building, but up here in the upper right hand corner, you'll see these low lighted areas, fiber optic lights, plushy couches. The environment in which we all go to school for all these years, if you're a public school student, is not a sensory friendly environment. Hard chairs, fluorescent lights, bells, right? You get a bell rings, you go someplace. Sound rings, you go someplace. Into a crowded hallway full of shouting people. You have 3 minutes to grab your books, if you're allowed to go to your locker, and then go off to the next class. All of those things, right, are sensory overload. And there are ways that you can mitigate that. So having a sensory break room is one of those ways. Having a what I call vestibular input room, complementary to a sensory break room, a loud room. Having a quiet room and a loud room. Because I'm the type of person that when I get overly excited or even angry, I need to be loud with music. Like I need to verbally stim. I need to hum. I need to beatbox. I need to make noise. And that's annoying for other people. I get that. And in a public space, having some place where I could do that could be the difference between me going home early or me being there for the entire day. Um, Social scripts. Down here in the bottom right, I have a little postcard here, and this is a card that I worked up actually for a member of my family who straight up asked for it and said, "I don't know what to do when I go to the store." And they asked me if I found everything. Of course, I found everything. I'm standing here at the checkout line. Why would I have be up here checking out if I didn't find everything I needed? That's a silly question. However, it's one of these social interaction things that people with a social disability won't pick up. And particularly maybe they don't have to pick up, but if they want to, doing things like social scripts, pulling having pull websites with more information than you possibly need if you're just a normal concert goer. But the fact that when, Jack White says he's going to go on at the Masonic at 7:00, most people know that means that he's going to go on at 7:30, 7:45, heck, maybe even 9:00. But if this is my first concert, and again, I'm autistic, you tell me 7:00, I expect 7:00. Why would, literal thinking, binary thinking is one of the things. So when you say things like be appropriate, what the heck does that mean? Be respectful, be professional, wear business casual clothes. So, possibly sometimes more details than you may think is necessary, but details that are adequate to the situation. And so those are some of the ways, and some of the other things that I have up here. One of the things that's actually available on the Humanities 101 website that I make available to all the students is the project planner. That's a micro accommodation because I know a lot of students have a hard time planning projects on their own. And so I created this little project planning handout so that you can plug in your deadlines. You can plug in May 1st noon is when I have to have my micro accommodation project due for Hazlet. And this is when you can then kind of reverse engineer what you have to do in order to get that done. Okay. So here are, again, examples of micro accommodations that could help someone with autism. But what you're going to be doing is looking at micro accommodations that are more than just disability. Yes, you can look at myriad disabilities. There are lots. There's EDS. There are tons of different disabilities that you may be familiar with that you think, hey, the world could do a very small change that could accommodate this group of people greatly. Okay. But it doesn't just have to be regarding disability. Here are two examples of micro accommodations. And again, the one on the left isn't technically a micro accommodation because obviously it may take a lot more than $200 in a public school to make a foot washing station. However, the act or the place of creating a place that, let's say, would be a prayer room and a place to wash oneself before one prays, is an accommodation that takes into account other people who are not, quote unquote, the majority. Okay. And so this is a picture that I took when I was down at George Mason 2 weeks ago. I was down for a conference and I was in one of the restrooms, and they had a sign up in every restroom on campus. They had a sign in every restroom that said, foot washing stations are found in these buildings, in these restrooms, and they had tons of them. And please, if you're preparing for, something sacred, do it there. Right. And they had these near the sinks because possibly people were utilizing the sinks to wash themselves before prayer. And the school said, hey, we can help kill, quote unquote, kill two birds with one stone, in that people need a place to wash their feet. We need a place where people can wash their hands. And because of cultural differences, people see that as different, even though, right? I mean, it's, yeah. Anyway, I would argue your feet are probably cleaner than my hands. But this is one example. On the right is an example of something that you see in a lot of bathrooms now, free sanitary products. And that's a micro accommodation that I personally would like to see in all bathrooms, regardless of what, is outside on the door, because this is something that you never know. And again, if you've grown up in the the school shooting era, you know that there's more than one use for these products. So this is, again, something that just to kind of get you thinking, some kind of micro accommodations. Now, I am coming back to the chat so that I can see questions. All right. Because I had to shut off the questions so that I could focus on the lecture here, because I was getting, I was getting distracted. I'll accommodate myself and tell you that because I have 5 or 6 different screens here going, and I'm trying to answer your questions while I was giving the lecture, I wasn't focusing on the lecture. So I had to stop where I could see the questions. So I'm back if you have any questions. So as I explained this last slide, feel free to post any questions. So I want you to think of a group that's not a majority. All right. Think of a group that is not and when I say majority, I don't need you to break down the numbers. Okay. I don't need you to say, well, technically, professor, women make up 51% of the population. So, that sanitary products micro-accommodation would not be. No. All right. I'm talking about, issues of power, issues of influence, issues of social. So what is majority and what defines majority will change depending on the situation, right? If you are in a school, let's say, like Fordson, what is a majority changes. And I'm not talking about demographically, right? I'm talking, many other ways. But when you think about who is in the majority in a situation, and when we think about, like, for instance, a school situation, in a college, quote, the idea of able-minded people are in the majority. So if you have an intellectual or developmental disability, what somebody would consider a neurological disorder, you probably are the other, right? If in the same way, if you look at, and I don't think our school still has this, but we used to, I used to argue against this all the time, but a lot of schools still have a physical fitness requirement, right? Because we have a concept that in order to have a sound mind, the Greeks, you must have a sound body, right? And this is why, back in the old days, Harvard had, um, um, intramural sports. That's where college sports come from. College sports were designed in order to keep people healthy, keep their body healthy. All right. And so what I want you to think about is, what obstacles does that group face? So if you let's say, uh, uh, teenagers, teenagers in social situations, the obstacle that they face is when they go into stores, they're followed around. When they go to uh, hang out at the local park or whatever, they've installed a siren that plays high pitched whines that only kids can hear, and this happens, right? And so what are small and inexpensive ways that we can address those obstacles? So again, I want you to find a problem for a group that is not the group in power. Define that problem and then find a solution. Find a solution that is cheap, inexpensive, and small. This is a huge this is a big lift, but I've been giving you various examples of that, right? If we've got an issue of colleagues who, or let's say classmates who always forget their pencil, right? One of the ways that you could micro accommodate is bring an extra pencil. And I know, again, I'm going from the very complex to the very simplistic. But when I think about even, I was just speaking with one of my friends today, and we were talking about the fact that they were very excited because now that they were getting their own place, they were going to put in those little bumpers on cabinets, because cabinet doors shutting loudly is jarring to them. And if it connects, and if you think about, if you were tapped on the shoulder 5 seconds all day and you turned around and then the person was like, no, I'm good. And then they tapped you on the shoulder again. They said, hey man, you turned around and they said, no, I'm good. They kept tapping all day. They did that. By the end of the day, you would be on edge. You would probably be shouting at people. You would probably turn around and shake that person and say, stop tapping me on the shoulder. And the ways in which small things like little adhesive pieces of rubber on the inside of a cabinet door is a micro accommodation for people with sensory issues. So you may have, as you're thinking about this project, you may say, look, I don't know of a marginalized group. I don't know of then pick the group that I gave to you. Go back and look at this lecture. This is why I gave you this group, the group of neurodivergence, and neurodiversity, and things like dyscalculia, dyslexia, Tourette's, stammering, ADHD. The fact that if you let kids get up and walk around, that's a micro accommodation. It's an inexpensive, small way. If if you think about it, it is these are what the Gen Xers call small acts of kindness. These are I want you to identify ways in which we can make the world better for not just one person, but for multiple people, by doing one or two small little things, making one or two small changes. I've got a friend who's an elementary school teacher. He does not say, when you go home to your parents. He says, when you go home to your grown-ups. And that small micro accommodation, and you may be thinking, oh, that's not a big deal, unless you are a person who lost your parents in some horrific way. Unless you're a person who has grown up never knowing them. Unless you're a person for a bunch of other reasons why just your teacher saying, go home to your mom and dad, and boom, immediately, you're 100 yards further away from belonging than you were before that word was spoken. And whether you know it or not, our brains, and this is shown time and time again through research, our brains are designed to identify those threats, even if we don't consciously know them. So this is why you'll get weird feelings in places. This is why you have that gut feeling and you're like, oh, I don't trust that person. It's because your brain has already identified the red flags. You just got to catch up. The gray matter, the stuff in the front, has to catch up. And yes, you can be looking at a small or big problem, but the fix, the solution that I want you to come up with, I want it to be somewhat small. Again, like I said, think under $200. Think something, and preferably something you don't even have to spend money on. I think of ways in which, okay, there are people in the world who, okay, everyone keeps asking, give me an example. Example coming in 3, 2, 1. All right, there are people out in the world that have a hard time communicating. There are people out in the world who cannot verbally communicate. I have stickers on my bag. I have buttons on my bag, and I'm going to go back and see if I've got a picture here. No, of course I don't. But you kind of see it here on this little pink button in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. The smiley face, the sad face, there on that pink button. I have communication stickers and communication. Oh, hold on. I can go on screen. Give me a second. Oh, nope. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so let's go. Boom. All right. So I have right here on my charger this sticker, and this is a non-speaking communication aid. Okay, this is one of the things that I came up with, or that we came up with for the foundation. And surprisingly, this sticker, there was a classroom of autistic children that were like, no. They didn't like the other one that I did, and this is what they came up with. This sticker, and if you turn this into a teacher's mouse pad, this allows a student who cannot communicate, right, to say yes, no, hello, goodbye, ask for food, ask for a drink, tell the teacher it's too loud, right? All on a 15-cent sticker. When I go to speak to elementary schools, I put those on my arm, right? I literally put one of those stickers on my arm, and I'll have kids come up and grab my arm and they'll point. Even children who have the ability and can speak will utilize the accommodation when it's there, because I'm a stranger. And if you think about what you've been told, you don't speak to strangers, but yet it's a school. But yet here's this guy who they're introducing to me as a professor who's coming in to talk to us about autism. And I trust him, but I don't trust him. So I'm going to communicate with him here with this sticker. Okay. So I want you to think about a group, think about a problem. All right. And in that, come up with a solution or a couple solutions. Think about, it doesn't have to be kind of a reinvention of the wheel. It may be something that you see being used one way, but could be used another, right? Often some of the greatest accommodations and some of the, for instance, have you ever seen the kitchen tools that have the big black rubber handles and the brand is OXO? I'm sure you've seen those. If you go to Target, if you go to Walmart, those were designed for people with mobility issues. Those tools were specifically designed for people who could not use quote unquote normal tools in the kitchen. And notice that if you go to Target, there's an entire wall of those tools, because what they found is everybody likes them. Nobody hates them. It helps everyone, hurts no one, right? Because if you accommodate for everyone, everyone benefits. If you think about more than just the people that you see in a room, and you think about who isn't here and why aren't they here, and then you solve that problem, that's where belonging happens. That's where community strives. Because when you don't, right, what you get is distance. What you can get as well is defiance, because people who love and want to be part of a community, if they are rejected from that community, can be that community's biggest and worst enemy, because love and hate are not opposites. They're just two sides of the same coin. Okay, so other questions that are coming up, and I see Mr. AJ's answering a lot of the questions, and I have been giving some examples here. Yeah, you can look at physical. You can look at physical mobility issues, but again, because your assignment is to create a micro-accommodation, right? I want you to think about ways in which, and there are tons of micro-accommodations. My friends who use wheelchairs talk about the fact that they're objectified all the time. The fact that when they get on a bus in the city of Detroit, the bus driver will say, "Hold on, I got to get the wheelchair on, and then I can help you." And my friend says, "That's not my name. I am not the wheelchair. I'm a human freaking being, damn it." Okay. And so that is a micro accommodation, a change in language, a change in terminology. I as an autistic person who was in therapy for what they call the rage cycle, said, I don't like that term. I'm not going to call it the rage cycle. And my therapist was like, well, that's what it's called. And I was like, no, it's not called that anymore. I'm not going to call it that. And if I don't call it that, then you can't communicate with me right now if you use that term. So it's dysregulation cycle from now on. Boom. That's what I'm calling it. Okay. And so again, when you think about the change, and you may be thinking big, right? You may be thinking, oh my gosh, I want to solve climate change and all of the people who are affected by climate change. Those are the people that I want to micro-accommodate. Okay. That's the key. That's the key to figuring out this whole thing. When you can start submitting, I would say probably wait until after the next lecture. That'll be a week early, right? Because again, I don't want you to I don't want you to get too ahead of yourself in that I'm going to be posting a couple more videos here throughout the next week or so, the next couple weeks, about micro-accommodations, explaining what they are in a little bit more detail. But again, I have been giving examples of micro-accommodations for the last 20 minutes. So if you're asking the question saying, can I have an example? Can I have an example? I would ask that you go back in the video and take a look. Okay. Because I came on screen here to show you an example. If you go on the website, there's explanation. There is also a few more details about the final exam on the assignments page. So if you go to the assignments page, I went through and added a few more details again, just to kind of prepare you. The next lecture is April 23rd. If you have questions, as always, you don't have to wait until the next lecture. If you are confused, you don't have to wait. I will meet with you on Meet. I will meet with you on I got Google Meet. I've got Zoom. Some of you have come into TikTok and we've talked during the lives. And so again, I'm usually live on Tuesdays and Thursday mornings. And people are asking, how am I going to grade? How am I going to grade? Okay. Well, and if you go back and listen, there were 3 things I need you to do, right? You're going to be defining an obstacle, right? Or defining a group, defining that obstacle, and then explaining a small way in which they can overcome. Those are the 3 things that I'm looking for. Okay. I am looking that you stick within the parameters, and I'll send you some details via email. I'll send, because people have really been, they want a rubric. So I'll give you a rubric. It's not going to be the rubric like you get in your English class. I know, I wrote those rubrics. I don't like those rubrics, because then I get the same paper from 25 students. And that's great when you're trying to get you to write an academic paper. But I'm trying to get you to think about humans differently. And so that requires you to think differently, and that requires you to get outside of your comfort zone, and that requires you to maybe dig a little deeper and maybe scratch a little harder. And those of you who have already scratched and done the reading, you know what I'm talking about. Those of you who are saying, what book? What are we talking about? Who's he? What's it? Shows me that you didn't watch the last lecture. You haven't been keeping up with even the things that I posted before you signed up for the class, because the link to the course text has been on that page since January 1st. Academic ableism has been available to you, and actually it's been available to you longer than that, because I had to give it to the college in what was it, September. I had to provide them with the ISBN and all of the information so that you could get the audiobook and the e-text. So it has been in the official course information since day one. And yes, thank you, Nada. It is on the website. There's even a picture of it on the website. So again, I think this class is accessible. I think it's a fun class, but I think some people aren't even meeting the class with 20%. So how can they expect me to meet them with 50? And so again, if you're interested in talking about this, send me an email. Drop in on I'll be on TikTok on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Or push comes to shove, we could even schedule something for next week if somebody needs to meet on Zoom or something like that. But I would highly recommend that before you meet with me, because one of the things I'm going to do especially now during finals time, is I'm going to ask you, have you read the course text? Have you gone through all of the website and read everything? Have you watched all the videos? And I'll know if you did based upon your answers. And so that's gonna be the first step that you got to take, right? You gotta read the book. And when I say read, listen to it, read it, have somebody else read it to you. I don't care how you get the information in your head. Again, this is all about accessibility. So this is why I've given it to you in a couple different ways. But you need to attempt to get the information in there. Okay? Other questions? Yes. And yes, thank you, Ken. You email me, as I said. Okay, so any other questions, any other concerns before we get going here? And I see the people on TikTok. I see, yep, okay, everybody up there on YouTube. And there's Twitch too. All right. Oh, fun stuff. Okay. All right. So again, we're looking at May 1st as the deadline, noon on May 1st. I will be grading after that because they give us till the 6th, I think we have, and to get your grades in. So that gives me a little less than a week to look at all that stuff. But if you have questions, if you have concerns, feel free to send me an email, and we can go from there. All right. But not pay attention. I'll probably send you notifications when I upload a new video here for these last couple of months or these last couple of weeks, because I know that you're going to be busy. You're going to be busy with other classes and with other projects and with spring in general. So don't sleep on this. Okay. All right. So I will speak to you all soon, and y'all have a good night. All right.